A feared king of the city spots a soaked, shaking girl eating alone under a flickering light and puts his own coat on her shoulders. One small mercy sparks a storm. Cameras flash, enemies circle, and whispers say the girl isn't just unlucky. She's carrying a secret locked in a tiny locket that could collapse his world. He hides her. Then the bullets start. A fake video paints him as the monster. A traitor inside his own table smiles. And when the rival drags her into the dark, the coldest man in the room does the one thing no one believes. He kneels, offering his life for hers. If he breaks his legend to save a stranger, who will fear him tomorrow? What's inside that locket worth more than an empire? And when love becomes the most dangerous weapon in the city, will he lose his crown, or will he make the whole world bow? The storm lashed against the city streets, turning the neon signs into watery blurs of color. Calla Jensen huddled beneath a grimy convenience store awning, the fluorescent light above her flickering in an erratic rhythm that matched her trembling hands. The sandwich she'd bought was soggy, but she forced herself to take another bite. Food was food. Her phone screen glowed in the darkness, illuminating the tear tracks on her cheeks as she stared at 2 notifications, an eviction notice and a voicemail about overdue hospital bills. The numbers swam before her eyes, impossibly large. 3 months behind on rent, 6 months of medical debt. Her throat tightened. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb, its headlights cutting through the rain. The back door opened, and a man stepped out with the fluid grace of a predator. Valerio DeSantis moved like he owned the very air around him, his presence commanding even in the downpour. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his expensive coat and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth of it enveloped her, carrying a subtle scent of sandalwood and something distinctly masculine. "Come," he said simply, gesturing to his restaurant 2 doors down. The establishment's windows were dark, closed for the night, but he produced a key with practiced ease. Calla hesitated. "I can't. You can." His voice left no room for argument, yet somehow wasn't unkind. Inside, the restaurant was all polished wood and soft leather, speaking of old money and careful taste. Valerio flipped on minimal lighting and guided her to a corner booth. He disappeared into the kitchen, returning minutes later with a steaming bowl of pasta and crusty bread. "Eat," he instructed, sliding into the seat across from her. Her hands curled around the warm bowl, and despite her pride, her stomach growled. As she ate, Valerio's dark eyes tracked every movement, noting the way she favored her left wrist. Purple-yellow bruises peeked out from beneath her sleeve when she reached for the bread. The silver locket at her throat caught the light as she leaned forward. His gaze lingered on it, but Calla's hand instinctively moved to cover it. Something flickered in his eyes, curiosity perhaps, or suspicion. "Thank you," she said, breaking the weighted silence. "But I don't want charity." "Is that what you think this is?" His accent wrapped around the words like silk over steel. "I'm between shifts," she explained, straightening her spine. "Once I get my next paycheck." "And the rent?" He nodded toward her phone, still clutched in her hand. "The medical bills?" Heat flooded her cheeks. "I'll figure it out. I always do." Valerio studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally he stood, pulling out his phone. "I'll call you a cab." Relief and disappointment warred in Calla's chest as she finished the last of the pasta. Through the window, she watched Valerio speak quietly to his driver, who nodded and pulled away from the curb. The rain had settled into a steady drizzle when they stepped outside. Across the street, a camera lens caught the light, its mechanical click lost in the ambient noise of the city. The image it captured would show an unlikely pair: a soaked waitress in a borrowed designer coat and the notorious DeSantis heir, standing closer than strangers should. Minutes ticked by. No cab appeared. "It seems," Valerio said, his voice carrying a note of carefully crafted concern, "that the cab company is overwhelmed due to the weather." He opened the passenger door of his sedan. "I'll drive you." The interior of his car smelled of leather and power. Calla gave quiet directions, watching the neighborhoods grow progressively shabbier through rain-streaked windows. When they reached her building, Valerio insisted on watching her climb the crumbling stairs to her third-floor apartment. Just before she disappeared inside, his eyes swept across the street. There, mounted above a pawn shop's weather-beaten sign, a security camera's red light winked in the darkness. His expression hardened imperceptibly, but by then Calla had already closed her door. The rain continued to fall, washing away footprints, but not the electronic evidence of their encounter. In her apartment, Calla hung his coat carefully over a chair, her fingers lingering on the expensive material. The locket felt heavy against her skin, its contents burning with secrets she couldn't share. Across the street, the camera kept its silent vigil, recording every shadow that moved in the night. She peeled off her wet clothes, mind spinning with the evening's events. The pasta had been the first hot meal she'd had in days. And despite her protests about charity, she couldn't deny how good it had felt to be warm and full. But warmth came with strings, and in this city, strings could turn into nooses. In his car, Valerio had been silent but not uncomfortable. His presence filled spaces differently than other men she'd known, less aggressive, more absolute. Like gravity, she thought, a force that didn't need to announce itself to change everything around it. The bruises on. Her wrist ached as she changed into dry clothes. They were fading now, a reminder of last week's incident at the diner when a drunk customer had grabbed her. She'd handled it herself, like she handled everything else. But the way Valerio had noticed, had cataloged every mark and movement. It made her wonder what else those dark eyes had seen. Her phone buzzed. Another bill notification. Calla closed her eyes, letting her head rest against the cool wall. Tomorrow would be another double shift, another day of counting pennies and dodging creditors. But tonight, for a brief moment, someone had seen her, really seen her. The thought was both comforting and terrifying. Morning light filtered through bulletproof glass as Valerio stood at his office window, the city spreading out 40 stories below. The silence broke with 3 precise knocks. Hawk entered, tablet in hand, his movements economical and practiced. "Show me!" The images were crisp despite the rain, frame after frame of Calla beneath the awning, her silver locket visible in each shot. More followed, her climbing into his car, standing close under his coat, disappearing into her building. Each photo spoke of surveillance, of calculated observation. The message? Valerio's voice was winter itself. Hawk pulled up the text, traced to an encrypted server they both knew well. 5 words from Kirill Markov. Hand over the girl. Simple, direct, a threat wrapped in courtesy. Valerio's fingers drummed once on his desk, the only tell he allowed himself. Shadow her, no contact unless necessary. Hawk nodded and vanished, leaving Valerio alone with the images and his thoughts. The day stretched long for Calla, tables blurring together as she pushed through a double shift. Her feet ached, her wrist throbbed, and yesterday's warmth felt like a dream. Tips were decent, enough to maybe cover half the rent if she picked up extra hours next week. She climbed the stairs to her 3rd-floor apartment at 4:30, fishing for her keys. The lock turned easily, too easily. The door swung open to chaos. Her breath caught. Drawers hung open, contents scattered across stained carpet. The mattress gaped, stuffing spilling from precise knife cuts. Books lay splayed, spines broken. But it was the careful way everything had been searched that made her stomach twist. Her eyes went to the shelf where she kept the locket box. It sat perfectly centered, exactly where she'd left it. Too perfectly. She crossed the room, hands shaking as she opened it. Empty. No, there it was, tucked in the corner as if someone had examined it and replaced it with deliberate care. Calla grabbed her phone, punching in Lena's number. Her roommate answered on the 4th ring, voice scratchy with distance. Lena, someone's been in our... Static cut through the connection. Can you hear me? Calla, you're breaking. The call died. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking as she tried redialing. No signal. The hair on her neck rose as she remembered all those careful searches that deliberately replaced locket box. This wasn't a random break-in. She had to get out. Now. Calla shoved her phone in her pocket and yanked the door open. She made it 3 steps before colliding with a solid wall of muscle. Strong hands steadied her as she stumbled back. She looked up into Hawk's impassive face, his presence somehow both terrifying and reassuring. He said nothing, simply gestured for her to follow. Each of his movements was precise, controlled, his eyes constantly scanning their surroundings as he led her down the stairs. A black sedan idled at the curb, Valerio standing beside the open rear door. Your apartment isn't safe. His voice was calm, matter of fact. I have a secure location. One night, I'll ensure you get to work in the morning. Calla's mind raced, the ransacked apartment, the dead phone signal, the carefully examined locket, and now Valerio, appearing exactly when everything went wrong. Too many coincidences. Why are you helping me? She asked. Because someone else is interested in you. His dark eyes held hers, and their interest rarely ends well. The drive was silent, winding through progressively wealthier neighborhoods until they reached a modern building of steel and glass. Underground parking led to a private elevator which opened into a minimalist apartment with sweeping city views and subtle security features. Reinforced windows, multiple cameras, clear sightlines to all approaches. Hawk did a final sweep while Valerio showed her the basics. Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom she could use. Everything was elegant, impersonal, clearly a place meant for temporary occupation rather than living. "The kitchen is stocked," Valerio said. "Help yourself to anything. There are new toiletries in the bathroom." He paused. "You'll be safe here." Calla stood in the entryway, one hand clutching her bag. The reinforced door waited, its heavy internal lock promising either protection or imprisonment. Through the windows, she could see the sun setting over the city, painting everything in shades of gold and shadow. Somewhere out there, someone had searched her home with methodical purpose. Her fingers found the locket at her throat. Whatever they were looking for, they hadn't taken it, which meant they'd be back. Valerio watched her, his expression unreadable. He hadn't pressed for explanations, hadn't demanded answers about the locket or why someone might be interested in her. But the questions hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken weight. The smart choice was to run, to grab what cash she had and disappear into the city's shadows. But something in Valerio's steady gaze made her hesitate. He'd offered help twice now, asking nothing in return. In a city where everything had a price, that meant something, or it meant the price was higher than she could see. The lock waited, its mechanism gleaming. One step would commit her to this path, to whatever game was being played. Around her, Calla took a deep breath, squared her shoulders, and stepped inside. The door sealed behind her with a sound like fate clicking into place. Dawn crept through the windows, painting the safe house kitchen in pale gold. Calla's fingers traced the handwritten note propped against a ceramic mug. "Rules: do not open the door, do not remove the locket. If you need me, call." The elegant script matched Valerio's controlled presence. She jumped at the sound of a key in the lock. Valerio entered, carrying a paper bag from a local bakery. Without a word, he moved to the stove, retrieving eggs and butter from the pristine refrigerator. "You don't have to cook for me," Calla said, watching him crack eggs with precise movements. "Consider it insurance that you'll eat." His voice was quiet, focused on the task. The kitchen filled with the smell of melting butter, toasting bread. While he cooked, Calla explored the apartment's silent hallways. Cameras tracked her movement with tiny red lights. Near the bedroom door, a discreet panel caught her eye, a panic button, its purpose unmistakable. Inside the room, neatly folded clothes lay on a chair, tags still attached. They were exactly her size. "How did you know?" she asked when she returned to the kitchen, holding up a sweater. Valerio slid a plate of perfectly scrambled eggs in front of her. "The same way I know you haven't slept. Observation is survival." She sat, fork hovering over the eggs. "Why am I here? Really?" "Because Kirill Markov thinks you matter." Valerio leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "He's a rival who specializes in leverage. If he's interested in you, there's a reason." The locket felt heavy against her throat. She forced herself to take a bite of eggs, buying time to steady her voice. "I don't know any Kirill, but you know something." His dark eyes studied her face. The apartment search wasn't random. Neither was the timing. Calla pushed the eggs around her plate. "What's the plan?" "Hawk drives you to get essentials, then to work. You stay in public spaces, follow his lead if he gives instructions." Valerio's tone left no room for argument. "After your shift, straight back here." "For how long?" "Until I neutralize the threat." He straightened, checking his phone. "Hawk's waiting downstairs. Finish your breakfast." The day passed in a blur of nervous energy. Hawk shadowed her through a quick shopping trip, his presence both reassuring and unsettling. At work, she kept seeing movement from the corner of her eye, jumping at every sudden sound. By evening, she was back in the safe house, standing near the window as the sun set. Her phone buzzed with a text from Lena. "Still in Chicago? Flight delayed again. You okay?" Calla started typing a response when movement caught her eye. A black car crawled past, windows tinted. Something about its slow pace made her stomach drop. The window exploded. Glass showered the room as automatic fire tore through the facade. Calla barely registered Valerio's presence before he tackled her, dragging them both behind the kitchen island as bullets punched into the walls. "Stay down," he ordered, pulling a gun from beneath his jacket. He returned fire with terrifying precision, each shot calculated despite the chaos. More glass shattered. Plaster dust filled the air. Calla covered her head, heart hammering as Valerio fired again. Something metallic pinged off the island. "Move." Valerio's hand closed around her arm. He pulled her toward what looked like a utility closet, shoving aside cleaning supplies to reveal a concealed elevator. The door slid open with a soft chime that seemed absurd amid the gunfire. He pushed her inside, following as bullets sparked off the closing door. The elevator descended smoothly into darkness, emergency lights casting everything in red shadows. Above them, sirens began to wail. "Breathe!" Valerio commanded softly. His hand hadn't left her arm, thumb moving in small circles against her skin. Calla realized she was shaking, adrenaline making her dizzy. "They found me. How did they—" "Not your fault." His voice was steel, wrapped in silk. "The safe house was compromised. This is why we have contingencies." The elevator opened into a reinforced bunker, all concrete and practical furnishings. Security monitors showed the apartment above. Empty now, plaster dust drifting through bullet-riddled rooms as the building's lockdown protocols engaged. Valerio guided her to sit on a utilitarian couch, kneeling to check her for injuries. His hands were gentle but clinical, at odds with the deadly efficiency he'd shown moments before. "You're not hurt?" she asked, noting a graze along his shoulder where a bullet had come too close. "I'm fine." He straightened, touching his earpiece. "Hawk, status?" A pause. "Maintain perimeter. No one in or out." Calla wrapped her arms around herself, trying to stop shaking. "They weren't trying to kill me. Those shots, they were pushing us back, containing us." Valeria's expression sharpened. "You recognize tactical patterns?" "I noticed things." She met his gaze. "Like how you were ready. You knew they'd find us." "I planned for every scenario." He moved to a cabinet, retrieving a blanket and first aid kit. "But you're right. They want you alive, which means we have time to figure out why." Upstairs, sirens echoed closer. The monitors showed police cars arriving, their lights painting the bullet-scarred walls in strobing blue. The safe house's automated systems sealed every entrance, transforming the elegant apartment into a fortress. Valerio wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, his touch lingering. "Rest. We're secure here." Calla clutched the blanket, watching him check the monitors. In the red emergency lighting, he looked carved from shadow, dangerous and controlled. A man who could shoot with lethal precision, then tend to her with gentle hands. "Why help me?" she whispered. "You don't know what's in the locket?" "No." He turned, eyes unreadable in the dim light. "But I know what it means to protect something worth dying for." The bunker's LED lights hummed softly as Valerio pulled up a chair across from Calla. His tablet displayed her photo from last night, her beneath his coat, his hand at her elbow. The image looked intimate, dangerous. "This is circulating through certain channels," he said, voice measured. "Kirill's people are suggesting you're under my protection. Leaving now would paint a target on your back." Calla's fingers traced the silver locket hanging at her throat. The weight of it felt heavier with each passing hour. "It was Jake's," she whispered. "My ex. He disappeared 6 months ago after taking some courier job." Her thumb brushed the clasp she'd never opened. "I keep it because it feels like his gravestone." Valerio studied her face. "If Kirill wants you, it's either what's in that locket or because you can move me. There's no third option." A train rumbled somewhere above, the vibration barely reaching them through layers of concrete. The realization hit her. They were deep beneath the city streets, no windows, no easy escape routes. The walls felt closer suddenly. "Tell me my options," she said, proud that her voice stayed steady. "Different safe houses, new identity if needed, protection." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But for now, every path runs through me. I can't guarantee your safety otherwise. And if I refuse, then I respect your choice. But Kirill won't. He'll find you within hours." Calla closed her eyes, exhaustion seeping into her bones. The weight of decisions pressed down like the concrete above them. "I need time to think." "Of course." He stood, checking his phone. "Dr. Sinclair will be here soon to look at those bruises. I'm also arranging a new phone for you. 1 number programmed in." "Yours?" A slight nod. "Direct line, always answered." The next hour passed in a blur of quiet efficiency. Dr. Sinclair, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, arrived through what appeared to be a service entrance. She checked Calla's bruises with gentle hands, prescribed rest and arnica gel. "The ribs are just bruised," she announced, packing up her bag. "Nothing broken, but take it easy for a few days." Valerio spoke quietly with the doctor while Calla explored her temporary prison. The bunker was larger than she'd first thought. A main room with monitors, a small kitchen, 3 bedrooms, and what looked like an armory behind a keypad-locked door. Everything was utilitarian but comfortable. A security tech arrived next, setting up her new phone with encrypted communications. He explained the panic button feature, the GPS tracking, the direct line to Valerio. Calla nodded along, wondering how her life had shifted so dramatically in 24 hours. As evening crept in, the bunker settled into a strange quiet. Valerio worked at a desk near the monitors, occasionally speaking into his earpiece in Italian. Calla paced, tried to read, checked her new phone obsessively for messages from Lena. "You should rest," Valerio said eventually, looking up from his work. "First bedroom on the right is yours. Lock or leave the door open. Your choice." The bedroom was simple but clean. Queen bed, dresser, attached bathroom. Someone had brought down her shopping bags from earlier. The normalcy of hanging up new clothes felt surreal after the day's violence. Rain started sometime after 11, audible even through the concrete. Calla lay in bed with the door ajar, listening to Valerio's quiet voice giving orders upstairs. The steady cadence of Italian mixed with the distant drumming of rain, creating an oddly soothing rhythm. She touched the locket, wondering what secrets it held that were worth killing for. Jake had been nervous those last few days, jumping at shadows. Had he known what he was carrying? Had he tried to warn her? The bruises along her ribs ached dully. Dr. Sinclair's cream helped, but the pain served as a reminder. She wasn't equipped for this world of violence and power plays. Yet here she was, caught in its web. Through the open door, she could hear Valerio pacing, his footsteps measured and controlled, like everything else about him. The man who'd shot with lethal precision was the same one who'd made sure she had comfortable clothes and medical care, who gave her choices even when there weren't really any to give. The rain intensified, pounding against the city above, while Calla lay in her underground sanctuary? Or was it a cage? The line between protection and imprisonment felt blurry now. Valerio's voice dropped lower, switching to English. "Double the perimeter. No one approaches without clearance." A pause. "Yes, even the regular cleaners. New protocols effective immediately." Calla pulled the blanket tighter, trying to find comfort in the security measures rather than fear. The door remained open, her choice, her small act of control. Outside, Valerio continued giving orders, his voice a steady anchor in the storm she'd found herself in. The rain drummed on, relentless as the questions keeping her awake. What was in the locket? Why did Kirill want her? How long could she live in this strange limbo of danger and protection? Near midnight, the lights dimmed automatically. Valerio's voice grew quieter, but didn't cease. Even in the darkness, she knew he was standing guard, weaving a web of security around them both. She wondered if he ever slept. The locket rested cold against her skin, heavy with its unknown secrets. Whatever Jake had hidden inside, he'd paid for it with his life. Now she was paying too, in a different way. Trading freedom for safety, trust for protection. Rain pounded against the city streets far above, but down here in their concrete fortress, even that sound was muted. Calla listened to Valerio's quiet commands, the steady rhythm of his pacing, and tried to find peace in the knowledge that for tonight at least, she was safe. Tomorrow would bring its own decisions, but for now, she let the rain and his voice lull her toward sleep. The warehouse loomed gray and nondescript in the morning light. Hawk guided Calla through a maze of corridors, his movements precise and measured. The air grew cooler as they descended a hidden stairwell, fluorescent lights flickering to life with each step. The private range stretched before them, longer than Calla expected. Paper targets hung at various distances, their human silhouettes stark against the reinforced back wall. The smell of gun oil and concrete filled her nose. Valerio waited near a steel table, his dark suit immaculate even in this utilitarian space. "First lesson?" he said, voice echoing slightly. "How do you read a room?" Calla glanced around uncertainly. "I look for the exits." "Good. What else?" His eyes held hers, patient but intense. "Watch people's hands," she ventured. "Where they're looking?" He nodded, moving closer. "Hands kill, eyes telegraph intent. Always note the exits, but remember, others will be watching them too." He gestured to different points in the room. "That corner, blind spot. The overhead vent, possible infiltration point. The emergency light could short out, leaving this section dark." Calla absorbed each detail, seeing the space transform from simple to strategic. Hawk stood silently by the door, his presence a reminder of constant vigilance. Valerio lifted a pistol from the table. 9mm, standard magazine. He checked the chamber with practiced ease. Weight becomes familiar. Recoil becomes predictable. He stepped behind her, placing the gun in her hands. His chest pressed against her back as he positioned her arms, fingers adjusting her grip. "Breathe with me," he murmured, slow and steady. The first shot cracked through the air, making her jump. The bullet hole appeared well wide of the target's center. "Again," Valerio instructed, his hands returning to steady her wrists. Her second shot strayed less. The third came closer still. By the fourth, muscle memory began to form. The bullet struck center mass, and a small sound of surprise escaped her. "Good," Valerio's voice anchored her, low and approving. "Your body remembers. Trust that." They worked through a full magazine, his presence constant behind her. Each shot felt less foreign, though her breath still trembled with the weapon's power. Hawk occasionally offered quiet corrections to her stance. Later, in a small office above the range, Valerio poured water into 2 glasses. Kalla's arms ached pleasantly from the morning's training. "In my world," he said, sliding 1 glass toward her, "mercy has a price. Always. Someone always collects." His expression hardened. "I won't let that debt touch you." The water tasted cool and clean. Kalla studied him over the rim of her glass, noting how his controlled exterior seemed to intensify rather than hide his dangerous nature. Early afternoon found them at a discreet tailor shop, its windows covered with "closed for renovation" signs. The elderly seamstress worked efficiently, pinning and measuring as Hawk kept watch by the door. "Nothing flashy," Valerio instructed. "Nothing memorable." The clothes were elegant in their simplicity. Wool-blend slacks, fitted jackets, shirts in muted colors. Everything designed to help her blend seamlessly between his properties, to move through the city without drawing attention. "The fabric is bulletproof," the seamstress mentioned casually, as if discussing weather rather than ballistic protection. She marked another hem. "Not perfect, but better than nothing." Back at the safe house, shadows lengthened across the concrete walls. Kalla showered away the gunpowder residue, mind replaying the day's lessons. Every shadow now held potential threats. Every stranger's hands demanded attention. She emerged to find a velvet box on her nightstand. Inside lay not jewelry, but a sleek phone, its screen showing only 1 contact and a prominent red button marked "Emergency." "Direct line," Valerio explained from the doorway. "1 touch connects you to me. 2 activates the panic protocol." He didn't elaborate on what that meant. Kalla changed into a borrowed t-shirt, soft from wear. The new phone felt warm under her pillow as she settled into bed. She strained to hear footsteps in the hallway, knowing Valerio often patrolled late into the night. The concrete walls held their silence. No footsteps came. Somewhere above, the city continued its chaotic dance. But down here, protected by steel and stone and dangerous men, Kalla drifted into sleep. The phone pressed against her palm, its presence both comfort and reminder. Today she'd learned to shoot, to read rooms like battlefields, to dress for invisibility. Tomorrow would bring new lessons in survival. The borrowed shirt carried a faint trace of gunpowder, despite the shower. Kalla breathed it in, no longer entirely foreign. Like the weight of the pistol, like the press of Valerio's chest against her back. Like the constant awareness of exits and angles. It was becoming familiar. Her muscles ached pleasantly from maintaining proper shooting stance. The seamstress's measuring tape had felt like armor being fitted. Every new skill, every piece of protective clothing, every security measure wrapped around her like layers of shelter. The silence stretched on, broken only by the faint hum of ventilation. No footsteps disturbed her vigil. Above, the city's night traffic created a distant white noise, but here in her underground sanctuary, peace settled like a blanket. The phone remained warm beneath her pillow, its single connection to Valerio both lifeline and tether. As sleep finally claimed her, Kalla's last conscious thought was of his steady hands guiding her aim, his voice grounding her as she learned to defend herself in this dangerous new world. The morning light filtered through reinforced windows as Kalla organized the borrowed clothes from yesterday's shopping. Her fingers worked methodically, trying to create order in this temporary space that didn't feel quite real. The silver locket swung forward as she bent to open a lower drawer. Time slowed. The delicate chain caught on a metal drawer pull. With a soft click that seemed to echo through the room, the locket's clasp gave way. Kalla froze. For months, she'd carried this weight against her heart, too afraid to look inside, as if opening it would confirm her ex was truly gone. Now it hung open in her trembling hands. No photo waited inside. Instead, a slim microdrive nestled in the silver cavity, its metal surface catching the light. Her throat tightened. All this time, she'd been carrying data someone was willing to kill for. The bruises on her wrist throbbed with phantom pain as she remembered rough hands searching for this exact secret. The sound of the front door opening made her spine straighten. Valerio's measured footsteps approached, his presence filling the doorway before he even appeared. The locket opened, she said, voice barely above a whisper. She held it out, the microdrive visible in its hollow center. Valerio's expression didn't change as he crossed to her. His fingers were warm when they brushed hers, taking the locket with careful precision. He studied the drive for a long moment, then reached for a laptop from his briefcase, one she noticed wasn't connected to any network. The drive clicked into place. Strings of encrypted data filled the screen, but Valerio's fingers moved with practiced efficiency. Numbers resolved into ledgers, dates, coordinates, and names. So many names. Kala watched his face as he read. The change was subtle but chilling. His usual controlled expression turned to something beyond cold, beyond anger. This was the face of a man discovering betrayal. Johnny, he said, the name falling like ice. Russo Holdings? Shell companies moving money every time our routes leak to Kirill. His jaw tightened. My own consigliere. Kala instinctively stepped back from the frozen rage in his voice. The movement caught his attention, and something in his eyes shifted. The ice melted just enough to show warmth when he looked at her. Thank you, he said softly, for trusting me with this. He closed the laptop with deliberate care. You've given me the truth I needed, and now you're the most protected person in my world. The weight of that promise settled around her like a shield. She remembered his hands steady on her wrists at the shooting range, teaching rather than controlling. How he made her eggs that first morning, ensuring she ate before explaining the danger. The way he gave her choices even when there weren't many good ones. Throughout the day, Valerio made calls, quiet, measured conversations that nonetheless carried lethal intent beneath their civility. Hawk appeared periodically, exchanging silent nods with his boss that spoke volumes. Evening approached with gathering shadows. Valerio checked his phone one final time before turning to her. I need to verify some of this data personally. He moved toward the door, then paused. Lock up behind me. If you need anything... Call you, she finished. I know. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. He waited until she engaged the locks, then his footsteps retreated down the hall. Kala pressed her ear to the door, listening to the quiet murmur of voices outside. She recognized Hawk's low tone, then another guard's response. The realization hit her. Valerio had positioned men outside her room every night, standing guard while she slept. She thought of all the times she'd strained to hear footsteps in the hall, imagining Valerio patrolling alone. Instead, he'd wrapped layers of protection around her so quietly she hadn't even noticed. Moving to the window, Kala watched the city lights flicker to life. Somewhere out there, Valerio was dismantling a betrayal. Somewhere, Johnny was still moving through his evening, unaware his careful deception had unraveled because of a broken locket clasp. The weight of the new phone pressed against her hip where she'd clipped it. One button to reach Valerio, two for the panic protocol. Such simple mechanics to trigger what she imagined would be an overwhelming response. She touched the empty space where the locket had rested for so long. Its absence felt right somehow. The burden of its secret lifted, transformed from a memorial of loss into a key that might keep them all alive. The guards outside shifted positions. She could hear the subtle movement. Their presence should have made her feel trapped. Instead, she felt oddly free. The danger hadn't diminished, but now she understood it, could prepare for it, had people willing to stand between her and it. Kala ran her fingers over the reinforced window glass, thinking of the bulletproof clothing waiting in her drawers, the gun she was learning to shoot, the panic button she hopefully wouldn't need. Every security measure was a thread in a web of protection, woven so carefully she'd barely felt it settling around her. The last light faded outside as the city succumbed to full darkness. Behind her locked door, surrounded by guards who would die to protect her, Kala finally understood what it meant to be the most protected person in Valerio's world. It wasn't just about the physical barriers and armed men. It was about being valuable enough to someone powerful enough that they would reshape their entire world to keep you safe. Steel gray clouds hung low over the river, their reflection turning the water to liquid metal. The warehouse loomed ahead, its weathered walls testament to decades of river commerce. Kala sat in the SUV's back seat, her shoulder pressed against the cool window as Hawk maintained his vigilant watch from the driver's seat. Valerio stood just within view, his dark suit a stark contrast against the building's pale concrete. The handler, Marco, she'd heard, someone call him, shifted his weight, hands gesturing as he talked. Even from this distance, his nervousness was visible in every movement. Stay in the vehicle, Hawk said quietly, his first words since they'd arrived. The conversation between Valerio and Marco grew more animated. Marco's hands moved faster, his shoulders tensing. Calla leaned forward, her breath fogging the glass. Something was wrong. The movement was quick, Marco's hand darting beneath his jacket. But Valeria was faster. 2 shots cracked through the air, sharp and final. Marco crumpled, and Calla's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. She should have been horrified. She was horrified. But underneath that, a steady certainty took root. That man would have sold her location to Kirill without hesitation. The same way he'd sold route information, leading to ambushes that had probably cost other lives. Valerio spoke briefly to his men, then walked back to the SUV. His movements were precise, controlled. A predator containing his violence. He slid into the seat beside her, and the car pulled away from the warehouse. The drive back to the city passed in silence. Calla watched Valerio's reflection in the window, noting how still he became after violence. Like a blade being sheathed, all that lethal capability tucked away beneath expensive wool and careful manners. At the safe house, she followed him upstairs. He headed for his room, that dangerous quiet still clinging to him. Before he could disappear behind another barrier of silence, Calla caught his arm. "Don't," she said. "Don't go quiet on me after this." He turned, dark eyes meeting hers. The control in his face cracked, revealing something raw and hungry beneath. His hand came up to cup her cheek, thumb brushing her lower lip. "Calla." Her name was both warning and question. She answered by pressing closer, hands fisting in his shirt. "I'm here. I'm choosing this." The kiss was devastating, need and fear and relief crashing together. His fingers tangled in her hair, tilting her head back as he deepened the kiss. She gasped against his mouth, and he swallowed the sound. He backed her toward the bed with predatory grace, but his touch remained careful. Even now, with desire burning through his control, he was conscious of his strength, of her choice. "Tell me to stop," he murmured against her throat, "and I will." "Don't stop," she breathed. Clothes fell away under urgent hands. He explored her body with the same intensity he brought to everything, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch against him. When he finally moved inside her, the pleasure was almost too much. She clutched his shoulders, nails digging in, as he set a rhythm that had her crying out. His control was beautiful to watch, power leashed and channeled into pleasure rather than violence. He whispered Italian against her skin, rough endearments that made her shiver. Afterward, he got up only long enough to fetch water and a warm washcloth. He cleaned her with gentle touches, then pulled a soft blanket over them both. She curled against his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. "You're thinking too loud," he murmured, fingers trailing along her spine. Calla traced the faint scar that curved across his chest. Old, silvered with time. "Do you ever really sleep?" He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. "Not through the night," he finally admitted. "Not for years." She pressed closer, offering comfort with her presence. The city hummed beyond walls of steel and stone, but here in this fortress he'd built, Calla felt the moment his breathing began to even out. She drifted off first, her head on his shoulder, his arm secure around her waist. The last thing she registered was the unusual peace in his expression, as if her trust had given him permission to rest, just for a while, in the quiet space between violence and tenderness that they'd carved out together. The rain started again, a gentle percussion against bulletproof glass. Calla slipped deeper into sleep, knowing she was safe here with this dangerous man who killed to protect what was his, who touched her with careful hands that could deal death without hesitation, who guarded her rest while denying himself the same peace. In the darkness behind her closed eyes, she felt the press of his lips against her temple, so light it might have been a dream. His whispered words followed her into sleep. "Rest, Tesoro. I have the watch." Outside, the city continued its eternal rhythm of light and shadow, but in this room, protected by steel and stone and a man who dealt in both, Calla slept without fear for the first time since she'd found that locket. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, there was just this: shared warmth, steady breathing, and the knowledge that she'd chosen her path with open eyes. The restaurant's private dining room gleamed with old money and quiet power. Crystal stemware caught the light, white tablecloths draped like fresh snow, and the scent of aged wine mingled with garlic and herbs. A carefully orchestrated show of normalcy. Calla sat beside Valerio, hyper-aware of the weight of his hand on her knee under the table. Around them, the inner circle of the DeSantis family maintained the illusion of a peaceful evening. Gianni Russo raised his wine glass, candlelight dancing across his carefully neutral expression. 2. Loyalty, he said, his voice smooth as aged whiskey. The foundation of everything we build. The words hung in the air like smoke. Calla watched Valerio return the toast with perfect composure, though his fingers tightened fractionally on her leg. Paolo Ferri, practical as always in his charcoal suit, steered the conversation toward business. The dock shipments are proceeding as planned, no disruptions in the schedule. Hawk stood near the door, his stillness that of a predator at rest. His eyes never stopped moving, checking reflections in the mirrors, monitoring the service entrance, tracking every shadow that passed the frosted windows. The waiter brought dessert, delicate tiramisu dusted with cocoa. Valerio's phone vibrated once in his pocket. He checked it with casual grace, but Calla felt the subtle shift in his posture. Something in the set of his shoulders spoke of contained violence. She glimpsed the screen, a notification from the ledger analysis program, a payment from Russo Holdings dated exactly 1 week before bullets tore through their safe house windows. Valerio slipped the phone away, his expression unchanged, but his hand found hers under the table, squeezing once, a warning. He caught Hawk's eye and made a minute gesture. The bodyguard responded instantly, speaking quietly into his earpiece. The dessert is exceptional, Yanni commented, watching Valerio over the rim of his glass. Though perhaps we should move our future meetings to more secure locations. The security here is adequate, Valerio replied, his tone carrying just enough edge to make Paolo glance up sharply. They finished their coffee in measured sips, maintaining the pretense of normality. Calla felt the tension coiling beneath the surface, like electricity before a storm. When they finally rose to leave, Valerio guided her with a hand at the small of her back. The night air was cool against her face as they stepped into the parking lot. Security teams moved in practice formations, checking sightlines and shadows. A car alarm chirped in the distance. Valerio's grip tightened on her waist. Down! The explosion came like a physical wall, throwing her forward. Heat and pressure rolled over them as the blast turned a black sedan into twisted metal. Calla hit the asphalt hard, feeling the sting of embedded gravel through her dress. Hawk was there instantly, covering her body with his as secondary explosions popped. Fuel lines or ammunition, she couldn't tell. Glass rained down like deadly confetti. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard Valerio barking orders in Italian. His security team moved with brutal efficiency. Cars appeared from nowhere, blocking potential sniper angles. Armed men secured the perimeter while others evacuated the block. Someone helped her to her feet and into an armored SUV. The secondary safe location was a penthouse with views of the river. Calla sat on a leather couch, watching Valerio work. He moved like winter personified, cold precision masking burning rage. Photos from the blast site appeared on tablets, shell fragments, detonator components, each piece of evidence carefully logged and cross-referenced. The timing had to be exact, Paolo said, studying surveillance footage. They knew our schedule. They did, Valerio agreed, his voice arctic. He wouldn't move against Gianni without absolute proof, but his patience had boundaries. Tonight had crossed 1. Hours ticked by, security teams reported in, analysts combed through data. Calla felt the weight of it all. Pressing down, the violence, the betrayal, the calculated ruthlessness of it. Near midnight, she found herself in a marble bathroom, cleaning a shallow cut on Valerio's forearm where debris had caught him. Her hands trembled as she pressed gauze against the wound. "You're shaking," he observed softly. "I'm angry," she corrected, though fear mixed with the fury. They could have killed everyone in that restaurant, civilians, families. Yes. His free hand came up to steady hers. Which is why we're increasing security by morning. No more calculated risks. She secured the bandage, letting her fingers linger on his skin. What happens when you have enough proof? His eyes met hers in the mirror, dark and promising. Then I remove the threat. Permanently. The city lights sparkled beyond the windows like fallen stars. Somewhere out there, Gianni was likely celebrating what he thought was another successful attack. But Calla saw the truth in Valerio's expression. This wasn't a game of chess anymore. This was a countdown to extinction, measured in evidence folders and surveillance photos. She leaned into him, offering what comfort she could. His arm wrapped around her waist, anchoring them both in this quiet moment before tomorrow's escalation. Outside, car horns echoed off buildings and sirens wailed in the distance. But in here, there was just the sound of their breathing and the weight of unspoken promises. The cut on his arm would heal without a scar. The betrayal that caused it would be answered with blood. For now, though, they stood together in the midnight quiet, watching their reflections in the mirror. A man of controlled violence and a woman who chose to stand beside him, both knowing that dawn would bring them one step closer to the coming storm. Sunlight streamed through the penthouse windows as Valerio stood before Calla, his expression unusually hesitant. "I have a solution, one that gives you protection without compromise." She watched him, noting the careful way he held himself, like a man approaching a wild creature. "A marriage," he said. "Legal, public. It places you firmly under DeSantis protection and complicates any attempt to use you as leverage." Calla's breath caught. The practical side of her mind immediately grasped the strategic value. She'd gain instant access to security resources, movement between properties without question, legal protections that even Kirill would have to consider. "This isn't how I imagined proposing," Valerio admitted, a rare flash of vulnerability crossing his features. "But I won't pretend it's purely tactical either." She studied him, this dangerous man who'd shown her both violence and tenderness. "I need terms," she said finally. "Name them." "Dignity in public, no trophy wife act." She held his gaze. "Truth between us in private, always, and no decisions about my life without my voice in them." "Agreed." He stepped closer. "I protect what's mine, Calla, but I won't cage you." The afternoon found them in an empty boutique, heavy curtains drawn against prying eyes. Hawk positioned guards at strategic points while running counter-surveillance sweeps. Through the windows, Calla caught glimpses of men checking rooftops and alleyways. The elderly jeweler presented a selection of rings, each elegant but understated. Calla chose a simple platinum band that wouldn't catch on clothing or draw attention. Valerio approved with a slight nod. Practical, like her. But he had another ring prepared. He placed it in her palm, a band forged from a spent bullet jacket, polished to a dark sheen. "What was meant to end will now last," he said quietly. She slipped it on beside the platinum band, feeling the weight of both promises. Protection and defiance intertwined. The boutique's peace shattered when Hawk appeared with a velvet pouch. Inside, a severed finger lay bloodless and pale. Not Lena's. The nail polish was wrong, the size too large. But the message was clear. A note accompanied it. "Tomorrow, dusk. She trades herself for the roommate." Valerio's face went cold as he read the message. He made calls, voice clipped and precise. The city locked down under his quiet commands. Teams traced the paper to a print shop front owned by shell companies leading to Kirill. "He's escalating," Hawk observed, checking sightlines through the boutique's windows. "He's desperate," Valerio corrected. "This is clumsy, public." Calla touched the bullet ring. "He wants me scared." "Are you?" "Yes," she admitted, "but not enough to be stupid." As twilight painted the city in purple and gold, they stood on the penthouse balcony. Below, the river reflected the last sunlight like burning mercury. Valerio's hand rested on the small of her back, warm through the thin fabric of her dress. "I won't tell you not to go," he said finally. But we do this on our terms, not his." She leaned into his touch, feeling the solid strength of him. "I won't be bait." "No." His voice hardened. "You'll be the trap." The city spread before them, a maze of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there, Kirill waited, thinking he held all the cards. But he'd underestimated the woman who survived on her own terms, who chose her cage and made it a fortress instead. Calla watched a boat cut through the darkening water, its wake spreading like ripples of consequences. "How many men do you have ready?" "Enough to start a war." He paused. "Or end one." The rings felt warm against her skin now, adjusted to her body heat. 2 promises, one for the world to see, one for them alone. She thought of Lena, probably terrified but alive. Kirill needed her that way to maintain leverage. "We should practice the ceremony," she said suddenly. "Make it look natural tomorrow." Valerio's lips curved slightly. "Worried about the performance?" "Worried about looking like what we are, a tactical arrangement." "Then we make them believe." He turned her to face him, one hand sliding into her hair. "We make them see exactly what we want them to see." The kiss was gentle but thorough, a preview of tomorrow's public claim, but his other hand pressed against her back, keeping her close. That was private, just for them. When they separated, the city had slipped fully into darkness. Lights twinkled like earthbound stars, and somewhere in that glittering maze their enemies waited. But here, now, Calla felt the strength of her choice settling into her bones. She touched the bullet ring again. Tomorrow, then. Tomorrow, he agreed. We show them what happens when they threaten what's mine. What's yours by choice, she corrected. His smile was sharp in the darkness. The only way I'd want it. They stood together watching the river flow, black as ink now under the rising moon, each lost in thoughts of tomorrow's performance, of rings and vows and carefully laid traps, of choices made and prices paid, and the fine line between protection and possession. The wind carried the scent of rain and river water, promising storms to come. But Calla stood steady beside her chosen protector, both rings solid on her finger, ready to meet whatever violence tomorrow brought. On their terms, not Kirill's. Behind them, Hawk moved silent as a shadow, coordinating tomorrow's players through hand signals and whispered commands. The city held its breath, waiting for dawn, for vows, for the moment when a marriage of convenience would become a declaration of war. Morning light filtered through bulletproof glass as Calla scrolled through her phone. The screen flickered with a new notification, an underground channel posting. Her finger hesitated before tapping play. Grainy security footage showed the night of her apartment attack. But something was wrong. The timestamp matched. Yet there was Valerio, pristine in his dark suit, giving orders to masked men before they stormed her building. The audio crackled. "Search everything. Find the locket." Her stomach lurched. She played it again, studying every frame. The lighting felt off, the movements too clean. But doubt crept in like poison. If he orchestrated it all, the attack, the protection, the marriage, then she'd walked willingly into an elaborate trap. Her phone buzzed with messages from underground forums. DeSantis played both sides, set up his own protection racket. Girl was just bait. She traced the video's path through sharing chains. Digital breadcrumbs led to servers owned by shell companies, each connection pointing back to Russo Holdings. Gianni's signature moves hiding in plain sight while he turned allies against each other. The betrayal crystallized like frost. Gianni hadn't just leaked information, he'd engineered a war with Calla at the center, using her to fracture loyalties and force Valerio's hand. Her phone rang. Hawk's number. "He's confronting a Russo accountant," Hawk said without preamble. "Stay put. Security's doubled." The video, "We're tracing it! Don't!" She ended the call, mind racing. Outside her window, 2 guards paced the perimeter. 3 cameras tracked the courtyard. All that security, but was it protection or containment? The velvet pouch sat on her dresser, instructions tucked inside. An address, a time, a promise that Lena would walk free. If Valerio had orchestrated everything from the start, then Kirill might be telling the truth about Lena. And if he wasn't, if the video was fake, Calla still couldn't risk her friend's life on that chance. She wrote the note with steady hands. "If you won't trade me, I'll trade me." Security focused on keeping people out, not in. She knew the guard rotations now, the camera blind spots. Valerio had taught her too well. She slipped through the service entrance during a shift change, wearing the neutral clothes from the tailor. Just another worker heading home. No one looked twice. The derelict train depot loomed against the afternoon sky, all rust and broken windows. Pigeons scattered as she approached the side door listed in the instructions. 2 men emerged from shadows. One patted her down, while the other checked for a wire. They found the locket, yanked it off her neck. "Hands," the taller one grunted. Zip ties bit into her wrists. They marched her past abandoned ticket counters, through a maze of maintenance corridors. The air grew thick with dust and decay. A phone appeared in front of her face. "Call him," she swallowed. "No." A hand tangled in her hair, yanked back. "Call." She dialed Valerio's number from memory. It rang twice before connecting. "Calla." His voice was arctic. "I'm okay," she said quickly. The phone disappeared. She heard muffled voices as someone else spoke, giving an address. The call ended. Miles away, Hawk's equipment pinged, triangulating the signal. He relayed coordinates to Valerio's convoy, already racing through traffic. They pushed her deeper into the building's gut. Metal groaned overhead. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Finally, fluorescent lights buzzed to life, revealing a cage welded from steel bars and reinforced with concrete anchors. The door screeched open. A shove sent her stumbling inside. The lock clicked with grim finality. Footsteps echoed on metal stairs. Kirill emerged from the gloom, elegant in a charcoal suit that absorbed what little light reached this underground tomb. He smiled at her through the bars. "Quite the performance these past weeks," he said, voice smooth as oil. "The devoted protector, the careful seduction. I wonder if you ever suspected." She met his gaze. The video's fake. Is it? Or is that what you need to believe? He circled the cage. Ask yourself, why did he really help that first night? Why insist on marriage so quickly? Stop. He saw an opportunity. A pretty girl with something valuable, desperate enough to trust the first hand offered. Kirill's smile widened. He does this, you know. Finds vulnerable women, offers protection, builds dependency, then sells them to the highest. Bidder. You're lying. Am I? Look how easily he let you walk into my hands, almost like... He paused for effect. Almost like he planned it. The concrete floor was cold through her clothes. The zip ties chafed her wrists. Somewhere above, pigeons cooed in the rafters, oblivious to the human drama unfolding below. When he arrives, and he will, to maintain his reputation, if nothing else, I'll enjoy explaining how thoroughly he sold you from the very beginning. Kirill checked his watch. Dusk approaches, time for reunions and revelations. He turned to leave, then stopped. Oh, and your friend Lena says hello. She's been quite comfortable these past weeks. Unlike you, she knew the game from the start. Amazing what people will do for the right price. The lights flickered, casting strange shadows through the bars. Calla huddled against the cold metal, mind spinning between truth and lies, protection and persecution. The video played behind her eyes, grainy footage, perfect suit, familiar stance. Real or manufactured, savior or seller. Darkness crept in as day bled into dusk. Somewhere above, engines rumbled, arriving vehicles, boots on gravel. The trap was set, but she no longer knew who was hunter and who was prey. In the growing shadows, Kirill's smile gleamed like a blade. Valerio found Gianni in a wine cellar beneath a closed restaurant, surrounded by vintage bottles and desperate lies. The old consigliere's hands trembled as he reached for a glass. You understand, Gianni said. Everything I did was for the family. Valerio moved like winter fog through the cellar's dim light. Where is the meat? Valerio, please! We've known each other since... The meat location. His voice carried no emotion, no mercy. They have leverage. The girl. The location! Valerio's stillness promised pain. Gianni's composure cracked. He babbled coordinates, security details, escape routes. Each word sealed his fate. When the information was verified, Valerio stepped closer. You were family. I am family, Gianni's voice cracked. Your father trusted me. I guided you. You betrayed that trust. Valerio's hand moved once, precise. The silenced shot echoed off stone walls. Gianni crumpled between $1,000 bottles, blood seeping into earth where wine had aged for generations. Valerio watched until the last breath rattled out. Some deaths couldn't be delegated. Some betrayals required personal attention. He emerged into night air, thick with coming rain. 3 calls set the machinery of war in motion. Businesses in key neighborhoods received quiet orders to close. Traffic cameras went dark. Hospital dispatch rerouted ambulances away from certain streets. The city held its breath, sensing violence on the wind. Miles away, in the depot's concrete belly, Kirill circled Calla's cage like a shark scenting blood. He's quite convincing, isn't he? Kirill's voice dripped false sympathy. The careful distance at first, the gradual protection, the way he makes you feel seen. Special. Calla sat against the bars, remembering. Not the grand gestures or the promises, but the quiet moments. Valerio teaching her to read rooms. His voice steady as she learned to shoot. The way he listened in silence when she couldn't sleep, offering presence instead of platitudes. Did he tell you about the others? Kirill continued. The girls before you? Each one thought she was different. Each one learned too late. The zip ties bit into Calla's wrists, but her hands had stopped shaking. She knew lies now, knew their taste, their texture. These rang hollow. Nothing to say, Kirill prodded. No desperate denials. She met his gaze. You talk too much. His smile tightened. Before he could respond, a guard burst in. Sir, DeSantis is here. Alone? Yes, unarmed. Kirill's eyes gleamed. Right on schedule. Boots scraped concrete as men moved into position. Shadows shifted in the rafters. Somewhere above, unseen, Hawk's team spread across neighboring rooftops with lethal precision. Valerio's footsteps echoed through the depot. Unhurried, deliberate, he emerged from darkness into fluorescent glare, hands empty at his sides. 6 guns trained on his chest. He looked at each man in turn, "This ends tonight," he said quietly. "Walk away now. You walk away alive. Stay. You don't leave at all." 2 guards exchanged glances. Another shifted his weight. "Touching," Kirill called. "But they know better than to trust a DeSantis promise." "Do they?" Valerio's gaze swept the room. "Ask yourselves who keeps their word, who honors agreements, who protects their people." Another guard's resolve wavered. Kirill snarled. He yanked Calla up by her hair, pressed a blade to her throat. "Enough games. You know why I'm here." "I do." Valerio took a step forward. Guards tensed but didn't fire. "You want what you can't have, what you'll never have." "Power, respect, the fear you've built your empire on." The knife bit deeper. Calla didn't flinch. "I have it all now. The mighty Valerio DeSantis walking into my trap for a nobody." "You understand nothing." Another step. "Fear is cheap. Respect earned. Power." His lip curled. "You're still playing with toys while real men build legacies." Kirill's composure cracked. "I have her. I have—" "You have a blade at her throat because you're afraid to face me alone." The words landed like slaps. Kirill's hand shook. Valerio advanced slowly, hands raised. "Take me instead. Let her go." "Name your price." Valerio's voice carried through the depot's stale air. "Territory, accounts, access to the port routes." Kirill's grip on Calla tightened. "You're desperate. It's delicious." "Not desperate. Choosing." Valerio moved with deliberate slowness, each step measured. "Everything I've built, everything I control, it's yours." "And I'm supposed to believe—" "On my knees." The words fell like stones. Murmurs rippled through Kirill's men. The great Valerio DeSantis didn't kneel, not for anyone. But he was moving now, controlled descent to concrete, spine straight. His palms turned upward, throat exposed, the ultimate submission from a predator. The myth of the untouchable king shattered with each inch he lowered. Calla's heart squeezed. She knew what this cost him, knew how many generations of power he was burning to ash. "Look well," Kirill crowed to his men. "The wolf shows his belly for a common." The first light exploded in a whisper of breaking glass. Another followed, then another. Darkness crashed down like a wave. Calla didn't think. She dropped her weight, rolling her shoulder forward as the blade skimmed past. Behind her, Kirill cursed. Bootsteps thundered as Hawk's breach team flooded the space. Metal glinted in the emergency strips. A guard's knife kicked loose in the chaos. Calla twisted, ignoring the bite of zip ties, and drove her heel into the blade. It skidded across concrete, finding home in a guard's thigh. His scream bought Valerio the heartbeat he needed. The collision was inevitable, as gravity. Valerio and Kirill crashed together in the half-light, all technique abandoned for raw violence. Knuckles cracked against bone. Blood sprayed black in the dim glow. Kirill fought like a cornered animal, all desperation and fury. But Valerio moved like death itself. Each strike precise, each block economical. No energy wasted. A knee to the solar plexus doubled Kirill over. An elbow to the temple staggered him. Valerio's hands locked around Kirill's head, and with one savage twist, the crack echoed off concrete walls. Kirill's body hadn't hit the ground before Valerio spun, tracking the last guard's movement. The man's hand inched toward his holster. "Don't!" Valerio's voice promised consequence. The guard's fingers twitched. Valerio's didn't. One shot. Clean. Final. Silence fell, broken only by harsh breathing and distant sirens. Above them, a red light flashed twice. Hawk's all-clear signal. Valerio crossed to Calla in 3 strides. His hands shook slightly as he cut the zip ties, fingers gentle on a braided skin. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough. She shook her head. "You knelt." "I'd do more." He pulled her against his chest, heart hammering beneath her palm. "But don't ever." His arms tightened. "You don't trade yourself. You're mine." Rain pattered through holes in the depot roof as they walked out. The sky above was torn and beautiful, storm clouds breaking to reveal stars. Hawk materialized from shadows, conducting a swift damage assessment. 2 of Kirill's men had surrendered when Valerio knelt. 3 more dropped weapons during the breach. The rest wouldn't breathe again. Cleanup crews moved with practiced efficiency, erasing evidence of the night's violence. Medical teams treated minor injuries. Transport vehicles idled quietly, ready to disperse survivors to secure locations for questioning. Valerio kept one hand on Calla's lower back as they navigated the controlled chaos. His touch was possessive, grounding. She leaned into it, letting the steady pressure anchor her racing thoughts. The night air tasted of copper and cordite. Emergency lights painted everything in surreal reds and blues. Reality felt thin, dreamlike. "The locket?" she asked suddenly. Hawk produced it from a tactical pocket. The silver gleamed dully, clasp still broken from that fateful morning. Calla ran her thumb over the familiar patterns before slipping it into Valerio's hand. "Keep it," she said, "with the rest of the evidence." He studied her face. "You're sure?" "It was never about memories." She touched his chest, where his heart still raced. "Just survival." His free hand cupped her cheek. In the strange emergency light, his eyes were midnight dark. Understanding passed between them, unspoken but clear. Survival had become something else entirely. A discreet cough from Hawk. "Sir, timeline?" Valerio's thumb brushed Calla's cheekbone once before he straightened. "Standard protocol. Full sweep, then sanitize. I want all data from Kirill's systems before they're wiped. Any resistance." His voice hardened. "Ends permanently." "Yes, sir." Hawk moved away, speaking quietly into his comm. Calla watched the precise choreography of aftermath. "What happens now?" "Now?" Valerio guided her toward a waiting car. "Now we go home. Tomorrow we begin again." "With a wedding?" His step faltered slightly. "If you still want that." She stopped, turned to face him fully. "You knelt in front of your enemies, destroyed your own legend. For me. I'd do it again." "Then yes." She rose on tiptoes, pressed her lips to the corner of his mouth. "Tomorrow we begin, together." The car door opened silently. Inside waited bulletproof glass and leather seats, security and comfort seamlessly merged. Beyond lay the city, its lights blurred by rain and distance. Dawn crept over the city like a hesitant whisper. The streets were unusually quiet, as if holding their breath after the storm. In Valerio's office, screens displayed the aftermath. Gianni's accounts dissolving into digital ash. Surveillance footage of Kirill's men fleeing the city borders, their faces drawn with fear. Calla stood at the window, watching the sun paint gold across wet pavement. The bullet-forged ring sat on the desk where she'd left it last night, after the medics had cleaned her wrists. Valerio watched her from his chair, his expression carefully blank, waiting for her to choose distance and safety. Instead, she picked up the ring and slid it back onto her finger. The metal was warm, like it remembered her skin. "You're my danger to the world," she said softly, "and my safety to me." His breath caught. In 3 strides, he crossed the room and pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. The next week unfolded in measured steps. Calla walked through an abandoned cafe space near the river, Valerio beside her as she outlined her vision. "A sanctuary kitchen," she explained, running her hand along a dusty counter. "Hot meals?" "No questions asked. For girls caught in storms like I was." He made one call. By afternoon, the space was being renovated. 3 days later, she stood in a gleaming kitchen, industrial ovens humming, as she taught 2 formerly trafficked girls how to knead bread dough. Through the window, she glimpsed Hawk's shadow, a constant guardian presence. "The dough knows when you're nervous," she told them, demonstrating the smooth, confident motions. "Like people do." The girls' hands grew steadier with each loaf. Valerio rebuilt his empire with surgical precision. In his office, she watched him draw new boundaries, in iron and blood. No trafficking operations would touch his territory. Information channels were restructured, old guard sympathizers quietly removed from power. "No more Giannis," he said one evening, looking up from his laptop. "The old blood is too corrupted." She brought him coffee, touched his shoulder. "New growth needs clear ground." Dr. Sinclair visited the sanctuary kitchen on a quiet afternoon, medical bag in hand. She examined Calla's healing bruises while soup simmered on the stove. "The physical wounds have healed well," she said, pressing gently along Calla's ribs. "And the other healing?" Calla looked through the window, where Valerio stood talking to Hawk, his profile sharp against the sky. "Some scars make us stronger," the doctor smiled. "You're cleared for everything." The wedding day dawned soft with recent rain. They chose the private garden behind their home, where high walls kept the world at bay. Roses dripped with leftover droplets, their perfume heavy in the morning air. Only their closest circle attended. Those who had bled for them, fought for them, kept their secrets. Hawk stood as silent sentinel, his usual tactical gear exchanged for a dark suit that didn't quite hide his weapons. Calla wore a simple cream dress, her hair loose around her shoulders. The bullet ring gleamed beside its more traditional partner. Valerio's eyes never left her face as they spoke their vows. "I will stand between you and any darkness," he promised, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. "My life before yours, always." Her fingers tightened on his. "I vow to be the one thing you'll never have to survive." That evening, they sat at their balcony table, the city spread below like a carpet of lights. Steam rose from bowls of soup, and fresh bread waited to be broken. The river moved steady and dark beyond the railing, constant as a heartbeat. Calla watched Valerio butter a piece of bread, the simple domesticity of it making her throat tight. His rings caught the city lights as he moved, one platinum, one gold, both promising forever in different ways. "What are you thinking?" he asked, noticing her gaze. She reached across the table, took his hand. "That this is our first truly calm night. No threats to watch for, no storms coming, just us." "Just us," he agreed, bringing her knuckles to his lips. Below, a boat's horn echoed, off the water. Inside, they could hear the quiet movements of security teams changing shifts. But here in their private space, time seemed to pause, giving them room to simply breathe. Calla broke the bread, offering him half. The ritual felt ancient, peaceful. "To new beginnings?" "To us," he corrected softly. "To now." They ate without hurry, sharing the warm bread and homemade soup. Every few bites, Valerio's thumb would brush over her rings, as if reassuring himself they were real. She understood the impulse. After so much chaos, this quiet felt almost unreal. The city hummed around them, its rhythm changed. In the sanctuary kitchen, girls were learning to trust again. In boardrooms and back alleys, new rules were taking hold. And here, on a private balcony above it all, two people who had fought through fire found their peace in simple things. Warm food, gentle touches, and the knowledge that they'd never face another storm alone.